This is the modded version. Because this is LCS
oh.
Lame.
They didn't even let it explode.
No. Oh, there we go. I was about to tell you guys to dislike the video, but don't. Leave a like because it did explode.
Ooh, 4th of July's coming some point, I guess.
I just thought of the video we're going to film on 4th of July, but I'm not going to spoil it.
Is it going to have hot dogs and sparklers?
No, it's going to have...
Oh, can there be hot dogs though?
I mean, you can bring your hot dog. Wait, if this actually works, this is a new party trick.
That would taste terrible though.
Nah. Whoa.
Oh wow, not the life hack table.
It's like when we poured lava on stuff on the main channel, and then the lava went to the table, and everyone was freaking out, and I was like,
it's lava. We had a little sheet metal.
Yeah, literally we had sheet metal, and then when it went through it, like, Chandler and everyone was freaking out. I was like, guys, what'd you expect?
Then our fire extinguisher didn't work.
Yeah, that was fun. Oh, wait, is that cereal?
Yep, Sour Patch cereal.
Wait, no way.
Yep, it's not good.
I'm just gonna... Hey, can you fix America? We're getting too fat.
Oh, it's the Walmart special too.
How? What does that taste like?
Probably bad.
Whose idea was that at SourPatchKids.co? Like, hey, start making cereal.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Why?
He's trying to get into the cereal.
10 times. Let's play this version.
Dude, that's like literally eating candy for breakfast. That is not healthy in the slightest bit.
He says as he loves donuts.
Me?
Yeah.
I rejected his donut.
I know, but
Tyler offered me a donut and I said no.
You used to love donuts.
But not for breakfast.
You ate them all the other times.
Well, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, but yeah.
But not for breakfast.
At least it's not for breakfast, the most important meal of the day.
Exactly.
Oh, look, he can't wash his windows because it's got all that bird poop on it.
Dude, I was in Disneyland one time and a bird literally pooped on me.
I've heard that story from you so many times.
I've literally only said it. That's the second time I've ever said it.
Don't die from other people getting you. Let's see if there's an APK. For there being no, like,
this. I instead just used copper that I pulled out from a bunch of wire that I had left over after moving to my new office. I then weighed each of the chains, and based on their purity, I calculated how much copper was needed to knock it down to around that 6 carat point. For the larger one that I determined to be at least around 14 carats, I went ahead and assumed it was 18, just for the calculations. I did this because it was better to overestimate how much copper I needed than to not add enough. Now, to mix the copper with it, I had to melt it all together. I'd done this before on a very small scale in a porcelain dish, but never with this much metal. There are many different setups that people use to do this, but I wanted to go with the simplest and the cheapest. From some videos that I saw, I found that it was possible to just do it with some blowtorches and fiberglass insulation. So I ordered the fiberglass from Amazon, and I went and picked up the torches and the paint can from my local hardware store. Also, while I was on Amazon, I picked up this small metal melting starter kit. Now, to put this whole can thing together, it was really easy. I just had to cut out a small circle to cover the bottom, and then I cut a larger piece to cover the sides of the can. For the torches, I drilled a hole in each side and shoved them in. I then put a crucible that I had inside, turned on the torches, and tried to position them properly. To try to keep the heat inside, I covered the top with more fiberglass, and I waited for it to warm up. As a point of safety though, some torch heads, like the one I have on the right, are made of brass. For general use, this is totally fine, but in this case, the tips of the torches are surrounded by insulation. This causes them to heat up way more than normal, and with brass, it can start releasing toxic zinc vapor. For this reason, I did it all in a fume hood, but I probably should have just avoided brass altogether. My torch head on the left is made of steel, and I could have just gotten another one. But anyway, after 15 minutes or something, it didn't even look like it was close to being red hot. I honestly wasn't very surprised by this, and I assumed it was because the can and the crucible were way too big for these small flames. The simple solution to this was to just build it using before adding more. So I put this inside my little can thing, turned on the torches, and covered the top. Within just a few minutes, it already started glowing red, and to get it going faster, I blasted the top with another torch. Then I let it sit there for a little while more, and it eventually started to melt. There was still a bunch of solid stuff left in it, but it was liquefying. There was now a lot of extra space, so I started adding more copper and gold. I started with the small 14 karat chain and all of its copper, and it might have looked a bit weird here. And this was because, to make sure that there was no moisture on any of the metal, no sense to risk overflowing it if I had to do a second run anyway. But in any case, with everything added, I covered the top again, and I waited for it all to melt. When it eventually all liquefied, I stirred to make things go faster, and to make sure that there was no moisture in it, I gave all the copper and the gold chains a strong preheating. Then, I slowly added everything to the crucible. At first, I just did this with the tongs, but I found that doing this for all the copper would take forever, so I just started pouring it in from a vial. It was a lot faster to do it like this, but it wasn't nearly as accurate, so I ended up missing with a bunch of the copper. However, this really wasn't much of an issue, because not including just a small amount of copper wasn't going to make much of a difference. When it all eventually melted, I mixed it around like before, and I let it sit for a few more minutes. I then went to pour it all into the same can, but I was a bit surprised because liquid metal started coming out from the side of it before the front. This definitely wasn't a good thing, but for the time being, it was still a bit too hot for me to investigate. So for the time being, I put the crucible back in the can, and I turned off the torches, and I let it cool. When I took a look at it a few hours later, I noticed that there were some huge holes in the side of it, which were made by the torch flame. This is why you aren't supposed to use oxidizing torch flames on graphite for long periods of time. I was lucky it didn't end up being a problem, but it could have caused the crucible to break when I tried picking it up. This could have not only caused all the gold to spill everywhere, it also would have been a huge safety hazard. But anyway, getting back now to what was thankfully not a catastrophic failure, all my gold alloy was now in this can. So I just quickly got rid of all the water, and this was what it was like. By dumping all the liquid metal directly into water, it created these pieces that have relatively high surface area. Ideally though, they would have been a bit flatter and looked more like cornflakes, but I think I just didn't pour it from high enough. In the can, just sitting on the fiberglass, found this chunk of alloy which had leaked out the side of the crucible. So I took this, along with all the flakes, and I put them in a beaker. Then, on top of all of this, I poured in some dye, which, like I mentioned before, has this really nice blue color. As the concentration of the copper nitrate increased, though, it slowly shifted to being a dark green. The silver and other trace metals are also being converted to nitrate salts and getting dissolved into solution. The silver nitrate is colorless, though, and there isn't enough of the other metals to really affect the color. When the reaction died down, I added another load of dilute nitric acid, and it started bubbling like crazy again. I waited for this to also settle down, and when it was done, I dumped everything into a larger beaker. I then kept adding more of the dilute acid, and I continued the same cycle. As I mentioned before, I'm using dilute acid here instead of the concentrated stuff, and there were two major reasons for this. The first one is that it stops the reaction from getting out of control, and the second one is that I needed the extra water to dissolve all of the metal salts that I was making here. A major effect of this, though, is that compared to the concentrated stuff, the reaction is slowed down quite a bit, which makes it take a lot longer. So to speed things up, this reaction needs to be heated, usually close to the boiling point. I didn't use a thermometer, though, and I thought I was close enough, but I don't think I was. And because of this, it would initially react quite a bit when I added more acid, but then it would kind of just stop. However, just by looking at the stuff at the bottom, I diluted it with an equal I did it 2 more times with boiling distilled water. Now, just as a quick comparison, if we look at the gold before, so there was no point in quarting. I just jumped right to adding the nitric acid, and like before, gold than I expected. I really didn't think I was going to get much of anything out of it, but this was a pretty decent amount. I now had to clean it up a bit, and I did the exact same thing as before, where I started with water washings, then I did some acid ones, and finished with some more water ones. I dried it on my abnormally heavy. Now that I had this huge piece of gold, I wanted to do some tests on it. I had always heard metals, and I wanted to see for myself. I did try bending